high mark. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by the channel. I'm TC, and this is Minnesota Black Robe Regiment Podcast, MBRR Pod. I am here today to do another episode of Libertarian Lowdown. I have joining me here in just a couple of minutes the Libertarian Muslim who I met on X and found out that he's basically a next door neighbor. So he's one state removed from me, and we'll let him decide how much he wants to tell about himself when he comes on and where he's from. But yeah, we met through. I was added to a chat group on X, as you guys know, Twix. I call it Twix. I got Twitter and X. I just call it Twix. And so saw him in the dialogue, and I'm like, hey, this guy's interesting. And the reason I say that is because I think a lot of people have some misconceptions about Islam and the direction that Islam in the United States apparently in most people's minds tends to go. Um, you get these closeted mentalities of, or pigeonholed mentalities of, oh, they're either, nasty radical fundamentalists, or they're all duped left wing voters. And so when I saw the combination, libertarian and Muslim, I'm like, the heck you say? So we'll be bringing him up here in just a minute. For those of you that are tuning in for the first time, I would love to have have your support here on the channel. Subscribe, if you will. If you are a regular viewer and you are a subscriber, but you like what I do and want to continue to help me and support me, there's a little button down there somewhere. Somewhere, not here. It's not on my stuff. It's on your stuff. That says join, and you could pick a little level of support and help me keep doing what I'm doing so that we can keep the show going. There's not a lot of paleo libertarian voices out there these days, and that's where I found myself. That's the camp I found myself in. So before I bring in my guest, a big shout out to the Angry Vet, who is has earned show producer credits for all of my live streams and videos from the channel memberships, and everything is done for the channel. Shout out to IMAV, who comes over from Subscribestar. They're both top tier supporters, and I cannot thank them enough for what they do. I thank everybody who subscribes and everybody who is a channel member for what they're doing. And a big shout out to my friend Pirate Tomsky from Great Britain, who has so graciously supplied so much of, well, this nice fancy mic. So, and really helped me get my show quality improved and up and going several years ago. And I can't do what I do without you guys, with the viewers and the supporters. So without any further ado, we're going to bring in the Libertarian Muslim. Thank you very much, sir, friend, new acquaintance, however you want to say it. I really appreciate taking time out on a Saturday to do this. Oh, probably shouldn't have said Saturday because it'll confuse people. We're recording this on a Saturday, folks, so it is not a live stream. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you're about.
First of all, thank you very much for that introduction and for having me here. I do think everything I'm doing truly is to provide a different perspective, not only to Muslims. I am speaking directly to Muslims on how I think they should be handling themselves. Well, first, let me begin with the disclaimers because I already think I have said too much without beginning with disclaimers. So, first, I'm going to thank God for giving me this opportunity. And I ask Him to keep me patient, humble, and respectful as I discuss these things because it's like somebody's taken a sledgehammer to my brain. And so I ask that I don't lose my patience in discussing some of these items. I also don't profess to have any sort of religious authority. either formal or informal. I am someone, even when and I'll discuss this a little bit further, when I served as executive director of a Muslim based 501c4 nonprofit, I would often tell them that I'm not a religious leader. I am the leader of a religious organization. I take my advice from our local sheikhs, from our prominent religious speakers, and then I apply those values and principles in a way that I think is commensurate with US jurisprudence and uh, can effectuate change in our community. But as far as being a religious authority myself, I do not claim to be, and everything I say regarding my religion should be taken with a grain of salt and followed up with your own independent research. Also, I want to mention that I will be disparaging the left very heavily. At least that's what I expect. But my intention, as
No
much
complaints from my audience, trust me. So,
okay, good. And it should be no complaints from anyone who's they say in the Quran it's not their eyes that have become blinded, it's their hearts that have become blinded. And truly, I think this is what's happened with the left. There is just so much corruption, lies. Our culture has become so debased for accepting all of this nonsense. And it's so throughout every corner of government that I am truly surprised that decent people haven't come out in mass. I know a lot of people have left the left, but there are still way too many. And when James Lindsay is one of these voices that have kind of risen to prominence recently, and listening to his videos, he discusses how 30% of Russia was pro Bolshevik, but that's really all you need. You need just a very adamant, persuasive, passionate, extreme group of people. And the rest of the population, if they are timid and silent, they can do all sorts of horrendous things. And we saw it with COVID. And so we should take these concerns very seriously. We have become complacent as a country, and we think that we are immune to the history books, that this country is so special, and it is a very special country, but it is not so special as to be in this unique, lofty place in history. And if we become arrogant, which we are extremely arrogant, we will see our demise. And I think, thank God the pendulum has started to swing in another direction, but we still have a long way to go. And so, even though I'm going to be criticizing the left, my work and my associations with the left were not fake. I, as far as I can tell, to the best of my ability, I never made statements that I didn't actually believe in. And please don't take this as a betrayal. In fact, I think I am honoring the values we both express to have. And so I'll give you an example. We work in initiatives that try to combat racism, okay? And I can be working with people shoulder to shoulder. And some of these people are fighting racism because, as our prophet described, it was associated with the age of ignorance, which is Jahiliyyah, like the pre-Islamic times. And racism is like a very ignorant perspective because somebody's quality is their character and how they think. And so racism is a very ignorant thing. It should have no place in any religious
exactly.
entity. And so, okay, great, we're fighting racism. But there's also groups of people that use race to pit one group against another to
Yep.
achieve power. And so you can be working side to side with these people for the exact same thing, and we don't know what's in their heart. Only God knows what's in their heart. And so I will tell these people I am fighting to eliminate racism and not to, use this as a power ploy. And
Do you think, if I
Mhm.
could, do you think,
Yes.
since that's probably one of the most powerful introductions I've ever had. Normally, everybody's very shy when they get started. So thank you.
Well,
Uh, um, do you think identitarianism, identity politics, is we see it on the right now, more than we used to. I think it. I think Trump brought identity politics into the right in a way that it hadn't been there before. But do you think that it was? Gosh, people on the right tend to look at the left and call them communists,
Hmm.
and the progressive left, and I see them more as, and I know you're familiar with Antonio Gramsci, but I see him more as Gramscian, and in that cultural Marxism, and I think they've been angling at that, the identity politics, identitarianism, as a tool of division and separation for generations now here in the U.S. Do
Well,
you think that has permeated the Muslim culture mindset across all the sects of Islam? Uh, because people in the U.S. tend to see Islam as a predominantly non-white religion, therefore it it's able to impact most people who follow the prophet in a way that's different than Christianity. And Christianity has its own problems with racism. I mean, we know that. Christian identitarianism is a great example of uh, Christian racists. But do you think it has worked as a tool to embed leftist ideology into Muslim populations, because most Muslim populations, even in the U.S., tend to not be white?
okay, so there's a couple of things. So I don't forget, and I do have a scatterbrain. So I don't forget. I'm going to first talk about the identification of white, and then I will talk about how, if I forget, how this identity politics has indeed crept into our community very strongly, and why I think that happened, why I think it's incongruent with our core beliefs, and why I think we should eliminate these, what I think are backwards policies that are grounded in a good moral message, but in actuality is what they call reverse racism, which is just racism. And I will discuss this was first on the issue of white. So this is very interesting because both of my parents are from Damascus, Syria. And I had always identified as white. I have blue eyes, and I always just associated blue eyes with light skin.
Hmm.
Syria itself is a very interesting country. John the Baptist is buried in Damascus. It's been controlled by the Persians. It's been controlled by the Romans. And so it's a very diverse land. And so I identify as white, but other Arabs from Syria, they don't identify as white. And I remember in one of these more progressive organizations, I was entering a meeting and I had to determine which classification I was. And so they asked me, and I was in front of multiple individuals, and I kind of paused. I don't know if you watched the Dave Chappelle skits, but there was one in which they had like a race draft. So like Tiger Woods was maybe drafted maybe by the Asians, I think.
I remember. Yes, that's
Okay,
a
so I
boy. That's a
felt like,
throwback.
oh, exactly. So I felt like, oh, which race should I be joining? To me, really, it's these are skin. Instead of saying black and white, it's more like it's like darker shades and lighter shades. These colors truly are insignificant to me. And I've always, I think, truly think the Middle East, there's so many cultures in there that we can blend in like a chameleon nobody really wants us to be in their group, but at the same time, we're very connected with a lot of groups, I would say. And so the issue of white is very interesting on federal applications. White, they say in parentheses right after
Hmm.
Middle Eastern and North African. They don't say European because that's obvious, but they do make the point of emphasis to say that white includes, for census purposes, uh, Middle Eastern and North African. And so when I was the executive director of a Muslim nonprofit, we had one of our main things we're trying to do is who are the Muslims so we can reach out to them, send them information, uh, try to educate them, so to speak. And that would be a very difficult job to do because there are no like Muslim tracking databases, at least not ones run by the government that are secret, which is kind of a joke.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's yes. There's not a single one run by the government at all.
yes.
That's none, none.
So, so
We're
this
on
is
all of
very.
them now. So because I'm tracked and you're tracked, so we're being tracked by everybody. So
Oh, no doubt about it. And it doesn't matter if there's a court order saying you can't. They don't
yeah.
care.
So
Um,
I want to drill down on something that you said,
okay.
because I'm the same way, but this is the pushback that we get from
Hmm.
the left and the right. Man, this is cre- I'm not put together today. Um, I don't look at an individual and see the level of melanin in their skin. The problem is everyone who wants us to say that it doesn't matter requires that we look at one another and see the amount of melanin in the skin. And when I say I don't look at color, and I never have, people get really mad at me. And they say, well, that's because you can't identify with what it's like to be us. And are you struggling then identify having to identify as white, when you do something on at a federal level or whatnot, looking at your brothers and sisters in Islam and saying to them like, I'm I people think I'm white, but I don't see things that way, but I have more in common with you. Has it made it difficult for you to make inroads? Because I know you've had struggles with even within the community.
Well, this is a very interesting question. I would say up until the last year, I was about, even as a lawyer, my always approach is to reach a reasonable conclusion through a discussion and rather than a debate. This is just kind of, I formulated this in my head. Maybe others have articulated it this way, but I say everything should be approached as a discussion. And the only time it should escalate to a debate in which I'm trying to prove my point right and I'm trying to actually prove you wrong is when you're not trying to convince the person you're talking to, you're trying to convince the people listening to the argument.
Yes.
And so, uh, in terms of me making inroads, alhamdulillah, I have, generally speaking, not had a very difficult time being a people pleaser because maybe even it's narcissism. I don't know. I've
No, it's
always,
libertarianism. Is what
okay.
it's.
Oh,
We
well,
are
you
not
have
people pleasers.
exact. Well, you. I think we are though. I think the principled people are. We ruffle feathers, but it's for the good of humanity. I truly believe this.
Oh,
And
I agree, but it just upsets people.
no, it
It
does
is
upset
it
people.
just yeah. Libertarians upset people because we don't fit a mold.
Well, people will forgive you when you're wrong. They won't forgive you when you're right. And we tend to be right a lot of times because we base what we believe on principles. We are by far, I would say, the most principled party. Um, And so, like if you inflate the currency, things are going to become more expensive. Like these simple things. It's not like we're magicians. We could predict what's going to happen. Okay, you tell people to mask up, for example. Oh, that's just a mask. I was one of these people, which everybody hated, that said, "Oh, it's just a mask. It's just law and order. It's just tyranny versus representative government. It's just the government having willy nilly say to intrude into your life to the point of injecting something into your person. Could there be a
Yeah.
more invasive thing?" And
Yeah,
so
that kind of truth does not sit well with people
no, it
at all.
doesn't.
Um,
So inroads were okay, but when I
yeah,
have told people I'm not white, they say, "Oh, or I'm white." They're like, "You're not white." I literally had somebody tell me, "You're not white," because they're so attached to being part of this, what I would call like this victim groups, subgroups. We have to belong to these victim
that
subgroups.
identitarianism again.
Exactly, and there
Yep.
is some strong pushback there, but I would say this is kind of it's really only the hard activists. I think there is like gatekeepers at the
Oh, for
politically
sure.
active level. They're very leftist. But underneath them, the majority, I think, they're not very familiar with Western jurisprudence. And they're just simple people that live by, I would say, Islamic and very similarly Christian values and, treat others like the way you want to be treated. You don't need to really belong to a specific political party to understand these concepts. So I would say most Muslims fall under this category. But when it comes to dealing with the hardcore leftist activists, which are the gatekeepers to our political uh, narrative, it is very difficult to make inroads
So,
with.
and before we started the official conversation, we were having the behind the scenes conversation, and you said that, and I'm going to paraphrase, so I want people to understand this is not a direct quote. That basically your study of the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet, uh, Islam actually is far more conducive to libertarian ideals um, than a lot of people would understand. And I I have in the past pointed to the recent past of a country like uh, heaven forbid anybody misunderstand what I'm about to say, Somalia, which prior to Western interference actually was the closest the world has ever come to a kind of a libertarian utopia of anarcho-capitalism. They were actually doing really well without any interference from anyone else and without a organized government at all. It was only Western interference that kind of set up the warlords that destroyed that country. Do you think that was a natural outpouring of the teachings of the Quran, or was it a fluke?
Well, first of
And
all,
do you agree with my assessment of Somalia
well,
prior
first,
to Western
yeah, I
interference?
would say I don't know enough about Somalia prior to Western interference. I will say that you're from Minnesota, I'm from Wisconsin. We both have large Somalian populations, you even larger than us. And I very much learned under Somalians. I remember my father would take me to Somalian like annual picnics, and we might be the only white people there really, but they welcomed me with open arms, and I'm very close with the Somalian community. At least I was, but they're very dear to my heart here, and it's such a tragedy that my entire lifetime that country has been just constantly harassed with Western interference, and then this Western interference creates vacuums because the first thing they do is eliminate the opposition, which is generally the people who are defending your country from foreign invaders. We don't like to picture ourselves as that, but if we had another foreign country come in here for our own good, you can see how things might get a little hairy. So now you create these vacuums, and if Somalia was some nice, like kind of like Libya, it sounds like I don't know much about Libya, but when people talk about Libya, they say it was the wealthiest African country before Gaddafi was assassinated. And so if Somalia was like, I don't know about that, but I will say it would make sense to me that, and I swear, and again, this is me going, I hope I don't exceed what is proper for me to say, but just some things I have come across. For example, the markets. The Prophet Muhammad, the first thing he did for the markets, he said there used to be like preference for who would get certain stations in the market. He said it's first come, first serve. And then like price controls, he said the prices are established by God. This is like a hadith. I remember reading this and I said, this is like the invisible hand. like free market, supply and demand, these are established by God in a way. These are principles. There's supply and demand, and that when humans get in the way of that, get in the way of the free markets, usually it leads to chaos. So this is
There
very
you go.
libertarian.
That was the exact word in my head. I was thinking it leads to chaos.
Exactly.
The order of human mind leads to the chaos that causes all of humans' problems.
Exactly. Exactly. And so what's another example? Another example is I believe Muslims believe in, okay, the prophet would have like governors, and these governors were very he appointed dependable people who can govern themselves. He did not mingle in their authorities. So I believe we have, like states' rights and even more states' rights. Like I think maybe it was a group of Jewish people that came to him. It might have, I think it was, I'm God forgive me if this is off, but I think the message is the same, even if I get some of the details wrong. But basically, it says they have their own rules, they have their own courts. So let them decide this dispute according to their own rules. He did not superimpose the Muslim beliefs on them. So, and then you even see in Saudi Arabia, there's what these things called compounds. And compounds are like where foreigners typically live. They allow drinking in there. And I remember when I first heard that thinking, oh, Saudi Arabia religious authorities are just copping out. They're being lackadaisical. They're not enforcing strong Muslim rules. But now I think back and think that's very maybe ignorant thinking of me. We we believe in. I believe that there's no compulsion in religion is written in the Quran, and so the freedom of religion to me is a core tenet of our belief. And if God wanted everyone to believe in God, it is very easy for Him to do that. So why would I force something on people when God has made freedom the default? And so if I say that Somalia was some libertarian kind of stronghold, I would say, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But what our teachings say and how those teachings have been interpreted and how they've been implemented are often very different things.
Well, yeah. When I first reached out to you and asked you about coming on, you had made some really powerful statements about the sectarianism within Islam and how you believe it's just been a terrible thing for Islam. And I'm there again. I'm paraphrasing. I don't mean to misquote or misrepresent you, but the feel I got from what you were saying was that like this the sectarianism, just like we see in Christianity and even in Judaism, it has done very little to advance the health of the religions and cause a lot more damage. And and I think we see that when you talk about how Jews um, got along so well in predominantly Muslim areas and in regions for millennia. Millennia. You look at the area in question right now, Palestine. Um, there was peace in Palestine between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. They lived side by side. They worked together. They ate together. They celebrated together in that region for millennia, and for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, until everybody came in and said, "Oh, you can't get along with each other. You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to get along. You shouldn't be agreeing." And I often look at now. I know that with the Ottoman Turks and whatnot, there was some imposed rule, but they really ruled from a distance, and Palestine kind of ruled itself. And they they just all lived out these natural principles of do unto others as you would have done unto you, and everybody lived in relative peace. And I look around now, and every time I can't say every, that would be too broad, but most of the time when you look at this new, yeah, well, I'm going to throw out a term that everybody loves to use now and I don't normally care for it, but this new liberal world order, it's causing, as you said earlier, so much chaos. It's so much chaos with everything that it touches. And it makes me wonder if maybe those of us with this libertarian philosophical perspective, if we just took a step back for a couple of days, just for a couple of days, and we observe the world around us and recognize that our neighbors actually live a lot more like the way we think than the way the world tells them they should think, would it shift our arguments? Would I be able to talk to a Muslim neighbor or a Jewish neighbor or a Christian neighbor, and same for you, and say, "Hey, just out of curiosity, what time did your local city council tell you to get out of bed this morning? What time did your local city council tell you to make breakfast? What time did they tell you to brush your teeth? What time did they tell you to go to the bathroom? What time did they tell you to um, read your holy book? What time did they tell you to go to work?" And when you focus on the conversation that way, do you do you think that that would give us an inroad with anybody, regardless of their religious perspective or even their sectarian, leanings, to really push the principles of libertarianism into their thought process without being, "Why aren't you libertarian? Why aren't you like me?" I don't know. Did that make sense? Because that's what
Yes.
I'm hearing you talk about with, even your neighbors, and how you went into a Somalian community picnics, and they just embraced you. There was no, "Oh, you're not the right kind of Muslim," or "You're white." It- do you Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, it does make sense. So first, God willing, we will return to where Jews, Christians, and Muslims can peacefully coexist in Palestine, or whatever you want to call that land. Uh, God willing, this will happen again. And
Is that inshallah?
inshallah, yes, God
Inshallah.
willing. Ojalá que in Spanish means, I think, like we are going to do. It's based on inshallah. Ojalá que. So that is what it is. It's a very often used phrase. And in terms of, I think what you're getting at is stepping back. We're getting into, I think, labels, like the issue of labels itself. And I think it's very closely associated with the ego. And I think who is the Buddhists? They've talked much about keeping your ego in check. I think this is really, I think, one of the greatest sins for humans is their ego. And if you think of the devil, his great sin, his first one is his arrogance and his ego. And so when you have labels, to me, we have to get out of. Okay, you're in Minnesota. I assume you're a Vikings fan. I'm
Well,
obviously
I
okay.
by for by by location, I don't pay much attention to the professional
Okay.
sports realm. So
Okay. Well, by association, at least, your neighbors definitely are, or most of them
no,
probably
oh yeah,
are.
they are. Yeah.
And, and to me, I would say right under religion maybe is the Packers, being a Green Bay, Wisconsin resident. But if you had to talk about the Bears, we would say obviously the Packers are much. Although this year I am cheering for the Bears as a sign of camaraderie with my in-law, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband. Uh, I am cheering for the Bears this year. But if we had a Packer and Bear fan, there's so much animosity between the two. If it's a close game. And what's the difference between the two? You, at some earlier time in life, associated with the Packers, and this other person associated with the Bears, and they both just play football, but we have so much pride in our team and animosity towards the others. But when you get down to it, it's just ego, pride, uh,
Right.
tradition. And so with the sectarian things, I do think that we sometimes get lost in the labels and not what the labels are supposed to represent, because that's what language is. Words have meaning, but when those words lose their meaning, they just become tools for oppression and tools for sectarianism. And so, what I kind of been using this example, this is how I look at Muslims. Now, to be a Muslim, there are things in the Quran. We talk about the 5 pillars of Islam. I would never say somebody's Muslim or not a Muslim. That's extremely inappropriate for any human to do, in my opinion. That's up to the realm of God. What I think we can say is these actions do not coincide with core Islamic tenets. I think that's the most one can say. But if somebody claims to be a Muslim, it's very inappropriate, in my opinion, to say, no, you're not. You can say, I think, however, that what you're doing is not very in line with our religion. And so I have this example I use. You have uh, you have a car that is designed like a Ferrari, and it calls itself a Ferrari. Okay, and then you have a car that is designed like a Ford, but calls itself a Ferrari. And then you have a car that's designed like a Ferrari, but it calls itself a Ford. And so if I go to the dealer and I say, bring me your Ferraris, he's going to bring me the Ferraris that are designed like a Ferrari and identified as a Ferrari. But he's also going to bring me some trucks that are mislabeled as Ferraris. At the same time, there's going to be some Ferraris in the lot that I don't get to see because even though everything they do in their design is a Ferrari, they don't call themselves a Ferrari. Maybe they don't know they're a Ferrari. But they, in my view, are very similar to me. And I don't hold them as, oh, you are some foreign thing that is completely antithetical to my views. And so when you take this approach, and I do believe the believer, he is forgiving with others and he is hard on himself. And so if you take this approach, it's a very encompassing thing. And what people do in the opposite is they say, oh, he's a this or oh, he's a that. And then they stop thinking about what that means. And this is very prevalent, I think, in simplistic politics. George Washington warned us about partisan politics. He advised us against this. And we see now that most political ads and most conversations are not nuanced. They just go to name calling.
I'm glad that you brought an analogy into this because it's exactly how the world functions today, in the political realm or even the religious realm. Within Christianity, it's like, oh, you're Roman Catholic, or oh, you're United Methodist, or oh, you're Baptist, and then of course everybody pictures fundamentalist Baptists, and that's how they picture things, and it's the same thing with the political realm. Somebody will go, oh, I'm a Democrat. Well, I can't work with you. Like
Exactly.
you don't know anything about them.
Exactly.
They said, oh, I'm a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat. Oh, well, I can't work with you, and we've seen that play out here in Minnesota, almost in a almost kind of a scary perspective, because we've done several Defend the Guard rallies, and I know you're familiar with Defend the Guard. Obviously, that's part of what the group that we're chat group we're in talks a lot about Defend the Guard. Um, there have been people that I have spoken to when I tell them, hey, would you like to take part in Defend the Guard? And they're like, well, who all's involved? And I'll name a name. Well, I can't be involved as a Republican. Has got something to do with that. Or, oh, well, that sounds like a Democrat thing. Or, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is a good for America thing. I don't, if a Democrat wants to pick up the ball and run with it on this one, I will back that Democrat. If a Republican wants to pick up the ball and run with it, I, I'll back them. If the people for the Democratic way want to pick up the ball and run with this, I'll do that. And I think that's what happens with libertarians is we're over here going, hey guys, dude, we're not the centrist, we're the reasonable people here. We are the reasonable people in all of this. it's your ideological affiliation that you've had browbeat into you for your entire life that tells you that the people over here who are making sense are the dangerous ones. you know and that's exactly how we introduce people to ourselves, is through the labels, and we don't actually listen to the meaning of the words that they're using. We just use the words as labels, as you said. I think of it all the time when you ask somebody, oh, so hey, I'm Bob from such and such, and I'm a doctor. Or, oh, hey, I'm Joe from such and such, and I'm a laborer. And right there, that's not who you are. Your job, your career, that's not who you are. I want to know who you are. And that's what we miss today. Nobody talks that way because we just well, I made the joke when you sat down and I said, when you told me you were a lawyer, I'm like, well, I'm out of my depth. I mean, I don't mean that. It's just a fun way to approach things, but that's exactly how society operates. And I have noticed that even more. It's I've noticed how intrinsic it is to our thought process the further and further I have moved into libertarianism and libertarian philosophy, that we completely cut people out of our lives strictly based on labels, and the chief of that is, what's your political ideology, what's your religious ideology, and what's your career field. Those three things right there will immediately push people away, or put you into a camp or a circle of friends that maybe you don't fit into, just because those three things that I mentioned are all that people care to know about you. And I'm super excited to have met you and connected with you, because I know that you're working to advance libertarian ideology and philosophy into one of those labels, into the Muslim community in your area, and it's not been well received.
No, I think it might be well received, but again, like I said, there's these gatekeepers at the top level, and again, I think it goes like TDS, and to me, a lot of it is just those labels again. Now, Trump obviously, I mean, obviously, he's a flawed character. There's many good qualities about him too. There are many things that are flawed as well. But they get into these, like, if you talk to these people with TDS, it's like, okay, well, how is he different from what Obama did? Like, didn't Obama do the surge in Afghanistan? He came as the peace president, then he did a big surge. It was supposed to end the war quickly. I think that's why people believed in it. They said, "Oh, okay, well, actually, this surge in troops will bring this war to a quicker end." So I guess we kind of just followed it, but it ended up being, well, if you look at Obama, he had the most drone strikes. I remember somebody, I think it was under Obama, though it could have been under Trump. It was definitely probably nothing changed between the two. But I remember in Afghani saying, we like cloudy days because when it's not cloudy, the drones come, or the missiles, whatever. And so it just was like nobody, there was like Afghani testifying before Congress. There was like three people in the attendance, and nobody cared. But for some reason, the Muslims cheer as if this title of Democrat is somehow superior to Republican, or a MAGA Republican, even worse. And so I do think we deal with labels, and it's not just religion. I think you nailed the top three. In terms of occupation, Robert Ingersoll, who was very critical of religion, he was, though I think, was a great attorney, and he said that it's much better, paraphrasing, to have someone with common sense. It's 1,000 times better to have someone with common sense than to have someone who is educated. Now, that's very interesting to me because I do think that we have been dominated by the educated people, and that the common sense people they have largely been disregarded because they don't have these lofty titles. And so when they say trust the experts, well, first of all, trusting the experts is a one-way road for malignant narcissists. When the experts in economics and the experts in the law told them how disastrous their COVID policies were, they didn't care about those
They
other experts'
didn't care about those experts, did
just
they?
their expert
Yeah,
opinion.
just theirs. Yeah.
And so, and in this case, and then you go into them and you say it's the common sense, common sense. For example, why are these pharmaceutical companies immune from lawsuits if everything is safe and up to snuff? Um, Other
You s-
common thing.
Careful, you're starting to sound more libertarian the longer you talk. That's
Well, I could go through the COVID stuff, but everything like didn't make common sense. And it's not just from the doctors. Let's go from the lawyers. Common sense question. If laws can be disregarded willy-nilly at the whim of an
There you
authoritarian
go. There
on
you go.
some vague future threat or some flimsy premise,
Some maybe
what
sort of
would
might kind of happen.
Yeah, what is the purpose of laws then? And then you could say, okay, well, let's say this stuff actually there was this virus and everybody had to be locked down and we have to trample our constitutional rights for this very pressing and obvious need. Well, in this situation, shouldn't we have full disclosure of everything? In order for this to pass, shouldn't everybody be vetted? Shouldn't we not censor the co-inventor of the mRNA vaccine, the most published cardiologist living today? Shouldn't we not listen to them before we make these rash decisions? Common sense out the window because of this sectarianism.
I
And
think one of the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go
Finish your
ahead,
thought.
go ahead. No, that
I
was
think
it.
one of the greatest examples of the mind the sectarian mindset, politically and even religiously, where this plays out is exactly coming out of the we call it the coof pandemic, because the 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 algorithm doesn't pick up on that as much, but I
Okay,
should have warned you ahead of time.
sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's gotten a lot more relaxed over the last 6 to 8 months anyway. But the irony is, for decades, people have been screaming "my body, my choice," screaming it from the left and the right. And I am against abortion wholeheartedly. I absolutely despise abortion. But the right screams it, but it's not your body, so it's not your choice. And then the left comes in and forgets, not, my body, my choice, and says, no, you have to do this because over here my body is more important than what you want to do with your body. And then the right starts screaming my body, my choice. And they're all screaming my body, my choice at the same time about two totally different topics, completely missing the irony that what they're actually asking for is to live like libertarians.
Absolutely, absolutely. I absolutely think. Well, number one, it's again, this is judge everyone by the principles they follow. And so these are, like I said, libertarians. Everybody wants to be libertarians, but nobody wants to be principled because they only want to apply these rules to themselves when it's convenient for them. And so I think again goes to the ego, but I don't really have much to add to that. I think that it was very hypocritical to just completely be oblivious to people who objected based on personal the property rights of your own body. Um,
Yeah, if you don't
and
have personal property rights over your own body, there's
exactly,
no such thing as personal property, period, at all.
exactly, and I think that's why they say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but the original by John Locke, I believe, is life, liberty, and property, which is very interesting because now you're saying, and I do think it's interesting because to kings and tyrants, they think we own everything, and you just get to subside based by my on because of my grace. And so to say no,
Their
these individuals.
beneficence, yes.
Exactly. And so I do think that property rights includes property over your own body. But yeah, it's like you said. And in terms of abortion, I also abortion is a tricky thing, but generally, I obviously I'm against this. I think the mother should care about what's growing in your womb. It's something miraculous. And I understand that there might be the exceptions, I think, is where it gets interesting. But after a certain limit, time period, it just becomes, in my opinion, abhorrent. Uh,
I did not
yeah.
mean to suck us down that rabbit hole.
Okay,
I
no,
just
that, okay,
no,
yeah, I won't go
no,
down that
it's
road
just
either.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it is. It's something that people have to wrestle with, but they need to wrestle with it from a personal perspective, and they need to bring their religious perspective in on that, and they have to arrive at not what makes them comfortable, but they have to arrive at the truth of their philosophy
Well,
when it comes
oh,
to that issue. And like I said, I was just pointing out the hypocrisy that comes with the sectarian mindset where we'll just talk past each other all the time. And those two topics to me coincided just perfectly at the same time.
well, let me add this briefly. It's not about it's prevalent in abortion, but it's really with all things, and that is with ethics. There's usually competing interests. So with abortion, you have personal privacy rights, but then you also have the question of uh, is there life? Is what's growing the fetus? Is that considered life? When do we determine life exists? And then what rights does this new life have compared with the rights of the mother? And the mother does have a lot of rights, in my opinion. And so it's a competing of two important things. And so even if we go to COVID, it doesn't have to be COVID. It can be any security measure. But basically, with all in law enforcement, there's a balance between the invasion of your privacy and our agreement to concede authority to law enforcement in order to live in a functional society. And at that expense, we do give up, I think, some liberties, but it's a balancing act. And in all things, I think there needs to be a balance. And I do think balance is a core tenet of our religion and an emphasis of the Prophet Muhammad. And if you live a balanced life, it necessitates an evaluation of competing perspectives. And in my opinion, like when interviewed for the WMCA job, I said that it's important, and when it comes to like the uh, in terms of debt, the one who's in debt and the one who is the bank furnishing funds, both of them have rights, and the obligation to pay back what you have borrowed is very high and very important in our religion, but so is not being usurious. And so there's this balancing act, and oftentimes because of political interest, because of political parties, because you're being funded by a special interest that typically only has one of these things in mind, politicians speak in this unbalanced way. And libertarians are more balanced, and that doesn't appeal to special interests. And I think that's another reason we struggle.
Yeah, I was just, I'm just thinking of all the jokes about libertarians about how we're crazy. And I can understand why people see it that way because you get Supreme Vermin gets all the airtime. You know, uh, they no one ever says, "Oh, hey, I met a libertarian the other day, and he reminded me of Ron Paul." No, the very first thing they say is, "Oh, I met a libertarian, and he was wearing a shoe on his head." That's kind of what it comes. And then we wonder why we can't get any traction, and then we're all terribly autistic. I mean, it's just the way it is. We're all just
Yes.
the group, the circle that I run in with in Minnesota when we like do the very non-libertarian thing of actually coming together and doing a meeting, we we will point to each other and go, "Oh, your tizzy is showing." So, and it's a reminder of just how our brains function or don't function. Do you in your personal conversations, clearly you're a studied and lettered man, but in your personal conversations, when you are talking to people who are all, we all know everybody we talk to is coming from some sectarian perspective or another. When you just are having those over the table, having a craft beer, because you're in Wisconsin, I think it's mandatory. Doesn't everybody have to drink one craft beer a week or something? I don't. Um, but when you're drinking a craft beer or having, dinner or whatever, and the conversation turns to your philosophy, do people make assumptions about you, my friend, because they happen to know that you're Muslim and just assume that you must lean a particular, to the left? Like all Muslims vote Democrat, right? Like, so what do you think of your presidential candidate? Things like that. Do you get those assumptions, or are you finding people not as quick to do that with you?
So that's very interesting. So the first thing is, I will say that as executor of the WMCA, when I took that job, I told the board at the time that I was not going to go against the grain, that I felt that the role of the executive director was to keep the ship afloat, but it was not my job to direct which way the ship sailed. And so that was the job of the board and the president. And so,
You were the helmsman. You just took
exa-
directions and steering.
exactly. And I do think I equated it to a judge who upholds a law that he personally disagrees with. I said if I ever got to the point where I couldn't conscientiously carry out my duties, I would just resign. But until that point, I wasn't going to go against the grain. So in my time, most of my time, and maybe I used that, maybe this has caused a lot of internal strife psychologically. I debate with myself whether that was a valid reason or just an excuse for not speaking up earlier because I felt it was uncomfortable. And, God reward the people who spoke bravely immediately to COVID. And there are a lot of people now that look back and can criticize it, but there were very few people. I
Yeah.
remember Aaron Rodgers, he used to take his own bus to the game. And I have my closest friend and assistant at my law firm when he worked at Marquette. I think he had to like every morning get like a COVID swab test or something. And this is it's like a humiliation ritual. And so in
Yeah.
terms of me speaking with Muslims, I don't really know how they reacted because ever since I started talking this way, uh, I never really got the chance to talk to a large audience. It was mostly through side conversations with higher
Hmm.
ups. And uh, I think we are so like our religion, it says we avoid argumentation. Like even our religious scholars know very little can be gained. And you can, if you look at Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, the the people in the social sciences will tell you that argumentation very rarely will lead to changing of minds.
Right.
And so we are very, I think, averse to ruffling feathers needlessly over argumentation that won't get anywhere.
Well, it kind of goes to what you were saying earlier, that there is a place to turn a conversation into a debate, and the debate at that point is to convince the other hearers, the other listeners. And and I'm glad that you said that earlier, and that you started to come back that way to it, because I've told people that all the time. Like when I do a stream, when I'm by myself and kind of doing a stream of conscious talk to my audience, or when I'm having a conversation with somebody else about these issues, my philosophy is much like yours. I don't know if what I'm saying to that individual, even if it's just conversational, is impacting them. I just don't know also whether or not the person that's sitting behind them or standing next to them, that isn't even part of the conversation, is hearing. Because the words that we use, even in conversation, can have a far wider impact than we can possibly imagine. And I liked what you said about, when you, as the executive director, um, that you understood your role to guide the ship in the direction, or not guide the ship in the direction, but to take guidance from the people who are steering the ship and accomplish that mission, whatever it might be. And I think 98% of the time, people who are well versed in libertarian philosophy are the best people for that, whatever it is, whether it's a job, whether it's a political activism, um, spreading a religious message. Um, Obviously, as long as the religious message coincides with the philosophy. But do you have you found yourself making inroads, and I used that phrase earlier, but contacts and uh, gaining ground in bringing Christians and Muslims and others, people from other religious sects together in ways that a lot of people couldn't imagine?
Um, I would say it's been a very uphill battle. I have, in terms of reaching out to the Muslim community itself, again, I am dealing, I think, with people who are of the quality of Ilhan Omar. And so it
Oof.
can be, I know, I know, I
Whew.
know, I know. So, and there are a
That's some
lot
high
that
level
aren't.
gatekeeping right there.
Exactly, exactly. And so it's been difficult to find inroads, and yet I just haven't been able to connect with them. But there was a group, it's from Florida, that recently, in the same group that, and by the way, I'm very quickly, Defend the Guard, that group, the group where we met each other was originally for Defend the Guard, and it kind of branched out into a more uh, non-interventionist position. And so, out of respect to the founders of that group, I am going to briefly bring up the Defend the Guard Act. It's an act that sets strict standards for the deployment of the National Guard in a war situation. And I think it's a very noble effort. I think all of our military really should be bound by the Constitution. And I do want to take a quick plug for that. Gosh, and where was I going with this? Oh,
I
yes, the
I don't
inroads.
know. I'm not in your head, bro.
Good, good. It's scary in there. Uh, but in terms of like when I'm communicating with others, they would, and this is actually what caused me to be very, I think, even more passionate about what I'm doing is because people would come and assume that I am a hardcore leftist just by nature, and they'll say very insulting things about conservatives to me with the assumption that I am a far left liberal. I do think I have traditional liberal values which
You
historically were
you might be classically liberal, like all libertarians are?
exactly, exactly. And it's just again, it's back to the labels.
Yeah.
I'm not that different from you guys. Um,
Well, you
but
kind of have,
but I
yeah,
haven't
you
made
kind of have
inroads with
this,
people like you.
yeah, you kind of have these strikes against you. You're Muslim, you're a lawyer, nobody likes lawyers.
Me too.
I know, right? So I talk to every lawyer, like, I don't like lawyers. um I had a just really something profound. Boy, I tell you, so profound. I forgot what I was going to ask. Oh no, you brought up Ilhan Omar, and since we can't say her name the third time, she's like Beetlejuice. She's like Beetlejuice. If you say it three times, she appears. Um, she's a curse word in my house. Uh,
Yes.
but since you brought her up, have you noticed the tactic in Minnesota with her is we have to find somebody that has the same skin color as her and comes from the exact same spiritual place as she does, at least allegedly, and that's the only person that we can run. The Republicans do that constantly. We have to find another female Muslim who's a conservative Somali to run against Ilhan. and that's the only way we can win. And even then, they can't beat her. So, um, do you find that looking from the outside, looking from Wisconsin to Minnesota, and watching her, knowing how dangerous she is, do you find that just absolutely mind-boggling that that's exactly what people do to try and defeat somebody that's has a political seat, that you have to run their exact twin just from an opposite ideological perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. And not only is it like inadvisable, I think it actually goes against my core tenets, and to me, it's what they call reverse racism. But again, it's racism. If there is a position, and I can see this as if you are from a historically, what do they call, marginalized groups, whether actual or perceived, uh, and you take this seat and people from that community, and I will say too, as a Muslim, when you hear of, it's, my opinion has definitely changed, but I can definitely say when I was younger, oh, I felt great pride seeing that Muslims have made inroads here and there, especially in the political spectrum. And so when you have this seat and you think, oh, this now is representative of how we have
Right.
made great strides, and it's not replaced with something, perhaps subconsciously one feels that part of them has been diminished. But I don't see this. Like I said, I think the true believer does not look at these superficialities. And the person that should replace the job in any job is the most qualified person. And I will
Right.
use this. I will use this as an example to talk about DEI quickly. Let's say, do you know Wembanyama? He's a basketball player, French basketball player. He's supposed to be the best thing since LeBron James, maybe the best player ever. He's a Will Chamberlain height with that can shoot the three. And we also, okay, so we're playing another team that has the best, let's say, WNBA player. Uh, what's the very good? It doesn't matter. Gosh,
Are you talking about the is it Caitlin Clark, the one that,
okay. Caitlin
yeah, that
Clark. It can be
took all
Caitlin
the
Clark. It could be somebody even much better than Caitlin Clark. It could be a different WNBA player. But this girl, this woman, she can, let's say, shoot the three very well. She can guard the perimeter very well, and she's excellent at shooting free throws. And if she goes to any YMCA in the country, whether it's male or female, she will
she's
be
going
the
to
best.
dominate.
Yes, but if you put her in a court with five Wembanyamas, the Wembanyamas are going to sweep the floor with her. And so, why do we have this mentality? But then we say, when it comes to the executives in every major department in this country, and even our Supreme Court justice, we base these positions on superficialities and not on their merit. And don't you see how when
That
China
get
sends
that
us,
gets you fired up, doesn't it?
yeah, when China sends us their five
Yeah.
Wembanyamas, and we send people who are great, but they're not up to the task. We need
Right.
our best people, and this has permeated every institution. We see horrible decisions being made by corporations. It's like
Yep.
you look at Disney. It's like, what are you doing, Disney? Just give me the reins to your company. I can revive Marvel in a quick turnaround.
I
But
don't know, man. I think Marvel might be
well, yeah,
done.
you're right. It might be too late now.
It might be too.
20, 20
That's like
awful
giving the
movies in a
paddles to
row.
the guy who's you just found that's been missing for 5 weeks. It just might be.
Well, you got to do a cold hard reboot and hope everybody forgets. But
So I'm gonna delve into something personal for you now, and in a good natured way. Who do you listen to? Who are your listens? Because you're a libertarian, so I know you got podcasters in your life. So so who do you listen to?
thank you. So I would say when it comes to religious issues, the top two I have are Hamza Yusuf and Notman Ali Khan. So Hamza Yusuf, I think he has a very good understanding of Islam and also of Western philosophy.
Oh,
And
really?
Yes, he's excellent. He is absolutely excellent. Hamza Yusuf, you should type. There's another Hamza Yusuf, like I think the guy in England is named. There's another Hamza Yusuf that's not good. Hamza Yusuf is in. He has the Zaytuna College. It's called in
Well,
California.
you could actually you could send me the name and the link, and I could put it
Okay,
in the description of
I
the
would be
video,
happy
as long
to.
as it's safe.
It is safe. And then the second one is a guy named Notman Ali Khan. I look for his videos when I want to have what's called tafsir, like commentary on the Quran. I think he is the best for that. And I think when Andrew Tate converted to Islam, he was the sheikh that kind of guided him through that formal recognition. And
I have a
those,
good friend who's married to a Turkish Muslim,
cool,
so
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and
So
awesome. And
you could say something to her in in your guys's shared language, and I'd have no idea because I'm pretty sure that she speaks some Arabic. So
yeah, and Syria is right next to Turkey, and
yeah.
they took a lot of Syrian refugees, so we're grateful for them, and they're our
So
neighbors.
for your religious, it was Hamza Youssef, and I'll never get the other guy's name.
Yeah, Notman Ali Khan, which I'll send you their names
Yeah.
and maybe their links after. And then in terms of libertarians or just general podcasters, I think the most important ones to me are well, Dave Smith, I think, has been crushing it. Tucker Tucker Carlson, I like. I think Tucker Carlson he showed great courage in his role at Fox, and I think him and Candace Owens, I think, have made it okay to have pride in being Christian again. Although I will say a little bit, well, no, I'll say those two interest me. Dave Smith, Tom Woods, yeah, Tom Woods. Uh, Joe Rogan, I think, is a good moderator, a good host, and uh, now you too. And I think
Oh yes. Well,
that's
that's
it.
yeah. Boy, if you have time in your day for me,
Yeah.
that's you have you have reached the end of the internet. And
Actually, I was just listening to your interview with Picard, and I was very interested in it. And I will tell you that if I ever pause a video and start pacing, it's a sign that my mind has been stimulated, and I found myself doing that often. So I hope your channel grows.
well, I really appreciate that. So I'm go I'm I'm on track to crack 4K by the end of the year. So I'm like, I don't know why 4K is so exciting to me. Just because it's another leap up. Uh, it's a labor of intense love. I'll tell you that because I've been at it for going on 5 years now. So cost me my career, but that's what do you do? Um,
Well, I am glad, and I could think it can be. I think you can't look at the numbers. I think truly the best content is ones that are created with the audience in mind, but one in which you don't care how many views it gets. And even my tagline in on Twitter, I have a quote from Al Ghazali, who I think is my favorite philosopher, and he says, "Do not concern yourself with." Gosh, I'm paraphrasing. I should have
I,
it
I
memorized.
I read it. I read it just
Yes,
before. Yeah.
and
Uh,
basically don't be concerned with praise or condemnation.
right.
And if you do that, and you're only there's if the whole world was angry with me, but God is happy with me as someone who also believes in God, theoretically it should bring us content. And so,
What's your I just need to relax and have fun, um, whether you're with friends or by yourself. What's your just like what's your like everybody would be shocked to find out that not in a moral way, but in a shock that you really you watch that or you listen to that. That's what you do, like underwater basket weaving. You knit like throwing stars or what do
well,
you?
Well,
What's your downtime stuff?
thank you. Well, I'll say I'm a big video game guy. I don't think that's too surprising. Um, so I enjoy video games. I enjoy RPGs and some sport games, and I especially have. It's like if I'm, especially if it's like after a long day of work. Well, I'll unwind that way, especially if I'm playing with friends. I'm also a big anime guy. This kind of I have two younger
That
brothers.
one threw me. I was not expecting that from a
Oh,
lawyer. I
if
was not.
you, I think there's some people who think, oh, it's an animated show. That means it's childish
Oh
because
gosh,
it's.
no! I just wasn't expecting
No, I know
anime.
not
So,
you, but there are people who think that way. And there's a show called Attack on Titan. It's a Japanese show.
yep, heard of it.
But my goodness, do I think it's one of the best works of art? The story, the soundtrack, the visuals, but ultimately the actual plot is very, very good, and I think very relevant to our times. So I like anime. In terms of music, I grew up listening to Tupac, although I'll listen to anybody that's produces good music.
I
Um,
just had an image of you in that role in Office Space, and the guy with the beat up car when he's
oh
playing his
yeah,
gangster rap, and the black guys pull up next to him, and he puts his windows up and locks the doors. I'm just
oh yeah, no
yeah.
doubt about it. I like to daydream, and I definitely will put the windows up and the music loud. I put it down when I go through neighborhoods, but I very much get into the music, and yeah, I'm very much like that, to be honest.
Here, I see you leaving your office, leaving the law firm, and your tie and your suit, and
Yes.
woofers thumping in the back, listening to some Tupac. Oh, that's interesting. Uh, who are your top two go to reads for libertarian philosophy?
Well, I would say Ron Paul will always, always have such a special place in my heart. In fact, I think I would, if I have a son, I'm strongly considering if I can find a wife that agrees, naming him Ron Paul. And so that's how high of a pedestal I put him.
Ron, I'm just trying to imagine Ron Paul, and I can't even remember how you say your last name.
Mullis.
Mullis,
I say
Mullis,
Malice, but it's
yes,
originally Mullis, but Malice is
Mullis. Yeah, Ron Paul Mullis. People are being like, "Where's he from?"
yeah. Well, yeah, I do think like because my name is spelled Wassim. So oftentimes people would say Wassim, especially if I like had a substitute teacher. And I
Yeah.
think having a weird name and people asking you, "Hey, what does that name mean?" It kind of forced me to be a little bit more social. So I do
Mhm.
want to give my children
So, well,
uh
that'll do it.
yeah, no, it will. So I had
uh,
to deal with it. Now they can.
so Ron Paul is your very first go to. Is there a second, or is that kind of your
I
read?
absolutely love Thomas Massey. I think that if what I think the Muslims should be doing truly, if they're going to just do a vote as a protest vote, they should write in Thomas Massey. Thomas Massey was the only representative, including Rashida Tlaib, who abstained, the only representative who did not equate criticism of Israel with anti Semitism.
Right.
And he votes it on a principled ground. It's not
Yeah.
because he's pro-Palestinian or pro-Muslim. He's just a principled person. And it was such like a heavy political and such a sensitive
Yeah.
time. And I don't mean to bag on Rashida Tlaib, but
But
I would say
yeah,
Thomas
she
Massey.
brings it on herself. So
Exactly. And Ron Paul oftentimes voted by himself, the
yeah.
only vote. And
Yep.
Massey is doing that too. And I salute these people who follow
Yeah.
principles when nobody else are. So I'd say those are my top two. And I
Uh
know, yeah.
picking up a fiction novel now. Fiction novel. Uh who are you reading?
Oh, to be honest, I'm what's it called? It was a book that was assigned to me when I was in high school, and I never took it seriously. And I'm rereading it again. And gosh darn it, it's with
You weren't
Ignatius
expecting this
Riley.
question, so
It's with Ignatius Riley. He's Confederacy of Dunces.
no, I have not heard of that one.
Oh, the Confederacy of Dunces is a hilarious book, and very tragically, the author uh, had a very difficult time promoting the book. His editor wanted him to change the ending. He didn't think it like had a strong enough message. But I loved the ending. I loved everything about it. He committed suicide because nobody read his book. Um,
Hmm.
and it's an excellent book, in my opinion. I think you should check it out if you appreciate witty novels.
Yeah, that's one I have not heard of. So that's. I just recently decided I was going to start asking these questions from different guests, depending on how much time we had. So, hey, so if you were going to give a message to everybody who's watching us right now, who's listening, maybe because they're driving, and of course you don't ever watch while you're driving, but what what message would you send? Not about Islam, not that that isn't important, but about the nature of the political world right now and what they should actually be doing politically, philosophically, with what we have in facing us over the next few weeks to potentially years.
Well, John Adams used to say, to be good and to do good is all we have to do. And that statement resonates with me. And truly, I think let us start with the intentions. I think that we don't even start with the if some anybody doesn't begin with the right intentions, you can't expect anything good to develop from that. And so I would at the very first say, be good. So have the right intentions and then try to do good with those right intentions. And I would say we are now in an age in which the truth cannot be treated in this. We have to be bold. We have to be bold right now because we are in. I believe in what Martin Luther King Jr. used to always say, and he used to always invoke Dante, in which he said the hottest places in hell are reserved for people who, in a time of a moral crisis, remain keep their neutrality. And right now, we are in a moral crisis. We are in a crisis unlike any other. And it doesn't seem like it because it's been a gradual process. But when you look around, there's just lies everywhere and corruption everywhere. And so, right now, I would say, like, if these people, Benjamin Netanyahu and Hillary Clinton and Lindsey Graham, if you like these people, so be it. But we expect these people who are unprincipled to act in this
Right.
evil or flippant manner. But it's the good people who stay silent, I think is and again to reference Martin Luther King Jr., he said there comes a time when silence is betrayal. And I'm not these guys that say silence is violence, but there does come a time, I think, in which
Yep.
the corruption is so bad that to just live in acquiescence is immoral. And I would say right now, all you have to do is say we do not consent to if more unconstitutional acts are enforced upon us, if they ask our police officers or our soldiers to do something that is in direct and in serious conflict with their most core principles, I would say now is the time to be brave, and now is the time to stand up for truth and justice.
Wow. Yeah. We are beyond the time where we can sit back and say, "Oh, somebody else will have to fight that fight."
Exactly.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. Where can people find you if they want to follow you
So,
in a non-stalkerish way?
oh, okay, in a non-stalkerish way, On X, I'm the Muslim Libertarian. I think that's the best way. I think we should support. Elon Musk isn't perfect, but let's support people who are protecting free speech. And that is one of the only platforms in which real dialogue can be had. So come follow me there and promote your channel as
Oh,
well.
thank
And
you.
let's promote. And this is something you I think talked about with, it was maybe with Picard. There's like gatekeeping. Like once you have a certain amount of followers, they don't want to uplift voices. I don't understand this. When I look back at our founding fathers, I don't look at Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington. I don't look at them and say, oh, well, this guy was way better than the other. I revere all of them. And we need to have this same mindset. We are truly, I think, in like a refounding time. The Overton window has been opened wide open, and we need to, I think, promote not just me, people like you, the guests you have, and let's promote like-minded voices. So find me
Well,
on
thank
X.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, and the link to your the link to your X profile will be in the description of the video if anybody on X would like to find you. So I cannot thank you enough for your time. I will I'll let you go. And if you want to sit in the green room and listen to me close, I won't take very long to close, but I will let you go. And I'll say all sorts of terrible things now about you that you can't say anything about because I have control of the studio. So
That's fair.
it's fair, he says. But no, I really do appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you said about not it's not about the views, it's about who's listening. And what I've learned over the last several weekends is that everybody likes my chicken streams on the weekends almost more than anything else. So, like this morning, I had 575 people watch my chickens for almost 2 hours. I like, hey,
Well,
I, and
they're waiting for the chickens to come home to roost.
ooh, hey,
That's what's happening. And
that's gonna
hey,
happen.
and I think that's awesome that you're doing that. I think let's encourage people to, like live a more self-subsistent lifestyle. I think that's amazing you're promoting it. So, great work in that regard too.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I'm gonna do my level best to not screw this up. I struggle saying it sometimes, but assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, I see. I could never do it that professionally.
That's all right. The intentions is what matters.
Well, I really appreciate your time and getting to know you, and I look forward to our journey together, especially when it comes to defend the guard. So,
Thank you, and I appreciate you for having me. And please continue doing your great work.
well, thank you very much.
Thank
Now
you.
I'm going to say goodbye to the audience.
Okay, take care.
Folks, I cannot recommend that you follow him on X enough. It's refreshing, and honestly, it just like it's when anytime you meet somebody else who's who is passionate about a project that you're working on or a project that you're part of, and you guys know I'm like I am intimately involved with Defend the Guard here in Minnesota. I have emceed the two most recent events that we've had for Defend the Guard here in Minnesota. I've already been asked to MC the next one. I did a spot with Mitch Berg on his show for Northern Alliance Radio Network earlier this summer. I was on with him for an hour to talk about Defend the Guard. I talk about it on a very regular basis. Talk about it over on Vet Nation when I'm co-hosting with Skipper over there. So I'm passionate about Defend the Guard because it's something that needs to be done. We have to get that done. So, uh, and just think about the fact that we're finding people who are libertarian now in every corner of all of the sectarian world, and this is how we make inroads. And we have to do like Wassim said. I said his name wrong again. um, we have to do like he said, which is we stop looking at people based on their perceived ethnicity, their skin color and start seeing them for the human beings that they are. That's the libertarian way. And that's the best way for everybody to live. And that's why I do this series, Libertarian Lowdown. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much to IMAV from Subscribestar and to the Angry Vet, to Tav, for being show producers, helping keep this going, helping make this possible. Thank you to everyone who is subscribed to the channel. Thank you to everyone who is a channel member. And if you have, even at a time like this when the economy is in the state it's in, if you have any ability to help by becoming a channel member here or over at Subscribestar, please do so. I would be very thankful, and it absolutely does help. So share this out, like the video, and give me feedback. Let me know what you think about what we talked about and who you'd like to see on for Libertarian Lowdown, or for maybe a TC and Friends Monday Night Musings. Give me some ideas. Let's get some people on here. Let's have some conversations, and let's challenge me. Find somebody for me that would be a challenge. And until next time, my friends, as my friend Monica made this handmade sign for me with my tagline on it: fight for your liberty, it is yours. Fight for your freedom, it belongs to you. Sic Semper Tyrannus.
We are going for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at